And from that time until the end of the war, this part of the railroad here that we call the Jackson District, for the most part, was in the hands of the Federal troops. Now, from Grenada on south, it wasn't quite that way. The Confederates held it part of the time, and the Federals. But the railroad was fought over all the way from here down to New Orleans, and the same thing took place over in the Grenada District. Now, while our railroad is being built here, and the one from Canton south is being built, there is another railroad which was called the M&T, or the Mississippi and Tennessee, that was chartered from Grenada, Mississippi to Memphis. And this chartering took place at about the same time that the railroad here was chartered, like 1853 or 4. And the men most influential in that railroad were up at Como and Hernando. But the first meeting that conceived that M&T Railroad, which is now our Grenada District, that was done at Como, Mississippi. Why Como? That's where the big farms are. That's where the plantations were. The topography of that land in there lent itself to plantation farming. So there you have another impetus for agricultural railroad. So it gets built and is in Grenada about the same time the Mississippi Central is, in 1860. But Grenada is a junction point, and it was there that the Federal troops finally moved on down and took Grenada. I don't know what the date of that would be, but they destroyed most of the Mississippi Central engines at Grenada. It was determined that something was going to have to be done with the records of the railroad, the management. There was a small management group that remained intact. So they equipped a car, a passenger car, I presume, and maybe they had two of them, one for sleeping quarters and for the cooking and eating of meals. But some of the men took their families with them. The headquarters train, it was called. It may have been more than two cars. But anyway, the headquarters train was taken by both the M&T Railroad and the Memphis and Mississippi and Tennessee and the Mississippi Central. Both of them had their office trains that were hidden during the war. One of them was taken out into the forest over here around Hardy, and then the tracks were taken up and it was concealed from the main line. And all during the war, or the last couple of years of the war, that office train stayed over there around Hardy, and the Federals never found it. And the same thing happened down in the vicinity of Duck Hill. The Mississippi Central train was down there. And one of the better stories in the Illinois Central's Mainline of Mid-America book about the history of the railroad, the superintendent of the M&T Railroad there had a controversy one day with one of his operators. They maintained a wire from that hidden area in the woods out to the track to the telegraph lines so they could keep in contact. The operator and the superintendent had a disagreement one day, and the operator walked off and headed north with everything he owned on his back. And the next time they heard of him, he was president of the C&W Railroad, or some big railroad up east. In other words, he became a successful railroader.